All right. So I had an awesome conversation with Christine Shu. Christine had been a food scientist, which was really, really cool by itself, but she had been a food scientist and she wasn't very happy. She wasn't fulfilled in that role. And what's cool about her story is how she got into real estate, um, how she was able to replace her income, reduce taxes, and have that control, have that freedom that she was looking for. Thanks for checking out this episode with Christine Shu. Welcome to Passive Investors Playbook. I'm your host, Charlie Hardage. In each episode, we'll sit down with successful people that turn to real estate to build and grow their wealth. We do a deep dive into why they chose real estate and what makes it so attractive to them. We explore why people in their industry could also benefit from passively investing in real estate. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced investor, a doctor or a professional athlete, love your job or hate your job, our show is here to help you build a profitable real estate portfolio while maximizing your free time and minimizing stress. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn from some of the best in the business. Welcome to Passive Investors Playbook. All right, this is the Passive Investors Playbook. My name is Charlie Hardage, and my guest today is Christine Shu, the co-founder of Noblivest. Christine comes from a corporate background in R&D and food technology. She spent 12 years leading projects in Fortune 100 companies. In 2020, she made the transition from a scientist to a full-time real estate investor and syndicator. Her company, Noblivest, acquires multifamily and short-term real estate across the Southeast. They connect their investors with passive cash flowing and equity multiplying real estate opportunities that create lasting impacts on their families, their futures, and the communities that they invest in. Their portfolio consists of $300 million worth of properties totaling over 1,400 units. Christine, I'm really excited to have you on the show today. I love your background, being a scientist to a real estate investor. I think that's super cool. Thank you so much for being here. Do you mind sharing with the audience a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Charlie, so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show. So a little bit about me. I think you gave a really nice introduction, a little more backstory on why I made the transition into full-time real estate was, in my career, I think I did well in my career. However, it just wasn't fulfilling to me. And I knew that from the start, but I also felt like I didn't have a choice because we're all taught, you go to college, you get a job, and then you climb the corporate ladder, you retire, and that's it. And so that's what I thought we were supposed to do, right? Just excel and climb that corporate ladder. And I just remember every job I had, I only had maybe like 3 jobs in my career. After that first year, the first year is great. I feel like that's the honeymoon phase.
Yep.
We get to meet new team members, work on new projects. But then after that, it's like, oh, okay, this is where, you start to feel, okay, what's next? You're doing the same thing every day. And even when you're not busy, you still have to show up to work and work your 8 to 9 hours a day. It's like, what's next? And so when I had kids, that's kind of where everything changed. I feel like my priorities completely shifted. When I was younger, climbing that corporate ladder was fine. And I would stay in the office till like 8 or 9 p.m. getting projects done, no big deal. But then when I had young children, and especially since my youngest son has a developmental disability, that was a really hard time for me and my family. We were just trying to figure out what this life was, like what's it going to be? We don't know what the future is going to bring. And so I'm like, okay, do I want to keep doing this? Do I want to keep climbing the corporate ladder? And I'm just not there. Like my son needs me, both my sons, they both need me, especially when they're young. And, I remember going to all these doctor's visits and therapies for my youngest son. I'm like, how am I balancing all this? I just can't do it. And I don't even love, my job that much to feel like this is a worthy sacrifice to make. And so I really sat down with my husband, be like, what can I do to replace my income? Where I feel like it's so important for me to bring income to my family and not just be on one single income through my husband. What can I do to still bring in income and contribute financially to my family, but still free up my time and really, be present for my kids and my family? So that's kind of like, sorry, long-winded backstory of how I made that transition in terms of what my thought process was and kind of what I was going through at the time. And so everything was pointing to real estate because also, when you're a high income earner, at the end of the day, you're paying a boatload of taxes. You're like, oh my goodness, this raise is like kind of void because most of it's going to taxes anyways, right?
Yeah.
So, we just did our research. I remember my husband and I, we were getting hit so much with taxes. We looked into this course called Wealthability. Um,
Wheelwright.
Tom Wheelwright, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and we actually signed up for his educational course, and our minds just exploded. And a lot of what he was teaching was, you can depreciate assets through real estate and also mitigate some of your taxes that way. So we're like, okay, let's make that move. And that's where I became a full-time real estate investor.
That is amazing. And what, Christine, I think our journeys are somewhat similar. I'm not a mom of two boys, but um, your career in food technology was not fulfilling. I love what you said. You knew you weren't going to be fulfilled and passionate about it from the start, but you didn't have another option, or that's what you thought, right?
That's what
Because
I thought.
I
Yeah.
think that's what I thought as well, where,
Hmm.
I was raised just like you, middle class mindset,
Hmm.
school, job, corporate ladder, and retire, at 70 or,
Yeah,
65 back in the day. Now it's probably 75, right?
that's
Um,
right. Yes.
and then you, so you didn't have another option, or you didn't think you had another option. Then
Hmm.
you became a mom of two boys, and your second boy has some developmental issues, and so at that point, your goals, your focus, your life changed,
Hmm.
and you said, I don't, my job is not a worthy sacrifice, which I love that term or that phrase that you use. My job's not a worthy sacrifice for my family and for our future.
Hmm.
And then at that point, it sounds like you joined Wealthability with Tom Wheelwright, a mastermind or a course.
Yes.
Your mind's exploded, and you said, "Holy cow, this is amazing!" And due to high income, you wanted to figure out how your taxes could be reduced, and you wanted to bring some more income in. So you
Hmm.
went to real estate.
That's
That's
right.
that's amazing.
Yeah. Good
What
summary.
Yeah, no, that a phenomenal story. I love that, and I think a lot of the audience can relate to that too, because do people are people passionate about their jobs? Possibly, and if you
Hmm.
are, that's great. Like, amazing, kudos, right? And a little bit
Exactly.
of jealousy there too, because I was never
Yeah.
really fulfilled. I was never really passionate about what I did, working those, that set schedule. And like you said, Christine, if you don't really have any projects, or maybe you're caught up, or work
Hmm.
ahead, you still got to sit there, right? And
Yep.
look like you're busy.
That's right.
Even if you're way ahead of the game, you still got to show up, right? So
Yes.
I love that you said all that. Um, how did you hear about Wealthability? Like, was that through the research that you and your husband were doing?
Yes, I think we Googled. We're like, how do you reduce your taxes? We just asked Google. We asked Google everything as kind of like the first place to start.
Yeah.
And so I think something in the search had come up with Tom Wheelwright, Wealthability. We started following his social media, listening to his podcasts. And then my husband was like, oh, he does this course. Maybe we should think about joining it. And I'm like, oh yeah, but it's a pretty steep investment. And these courses, they're pricey sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think we were eager to learn strategies on how to mitigate taxes because we all hear it. And sometimes it's not in the most positive connotation in the news, like, certain wealthy people pay like zero taxes. We hear that all the time. And it's Yeah, it's not something that people like to hear. Like, well, if they're making all this money, why aren't they doing their fair share of paying taxes? And it's, I understand that. Yes, if you are well off, you should be paying taxes to help fund whatever programs are in the community. I think that is important. But for me, the way I look at our government sometimes, I feel like it fails us
Yeah.
because we we are spending trillions of dollars of taxpayer money on certain things that are not spent wisely, in my opinion. And even when I'm working with the government, like when there's certain projects that I've had, whatever exposure I've had with them, they just spend very carelessly. Like they don't really care. They're not being, careful about spending the money because it's all there. And so I think for us as real estate investors, I feel like also we have a responsibility because we're providing housing. Whereas I feel like a lot of times our governments, they're not able to do that. So it is a partnership. And yes, some of our taxes are mitigated, but we are doing our part by providing homes in the community for people that are needed. And so not just that, I feel like entrepreneurs in general, and I feel like the responsible entrepreneur take it very seriously as a responsibility to help the community. Um, and so yes, it may not be in the form of paying taxes, but it's other ways. And so that's just my opinion
Yeah.
there.
No,
Yeah.
and I think you're right. You mentioned government fails us. I think there's a lot of programs that are supposed to be helpful and just get watered down,
Mhm.
through, I don't remember the stat, but it's like for every dollar Americans pay in taxes, only like 30 or 40 cents is actually used to help the community.
Right.
And that kind of seems messed up, but we're not a political show, so I won't get
No.
into that. But
Yeah.
the what you said, entrepreneurs help the community, and I love that. And as you
Mhm.
were saying that, I was kind of thinking, there's small businesses out there, and larger companies as well, and
Mhm.
some are in it to make, well, they're all in it to make money, but some do help the community, and I truly believe that you and I both as multifamily syndicators and working with apartments, and not one
Mhm.
or two units, but 100+ unit communities,
That's
we're
right.
able to impact hundreds of lives at every property that we own, right? Because
Mhm.
we go in there and improve the community as opposed to let it be run down. And now it's not necessarily a safe place to live. Maybe it's not crime ridden, but flooring's coming up and kids are tripping. I've seen that at
Mhm.
properties, right? So
Exactly.
things like that are very beneficial. And because the government doesn't provide housing, they incentivize people like you and I
Mhm.
to create safe housing, and then in return, there's some massive tax benefits, right? So
Mhm.
in addition to being fulfilling and providing better communities, better space to live. So I love what you said there, Christine. You know, the government does spend or does not spend carefully. And I think that's something too, especially over the last, we're recording this in 2023, but really over the last, couple of years, inflation's been so high. And so,
Mhm.
um, you know, a lot of Americans are suffering because of much higher groceries and rent and things like that. But um, so I want to go back to the wealth ability. You guys, you and your husband Googled that, Googled something on maybe financial freedom or how to build wealth or something, and wealth
Yeah.
ability came up. And I know Tom Wheelwright talks about more than just real estate, but for you and
Right.
your husband, the real estate piece was just kind of slapping you in the face and like, okay, there's something to this, right? And
Mhm.
so before you Googled that, did you have any background in real estate?
I did actually by accident.
Okay.
So in 2008, I was only 21 years old and I bought my first condo because at that time I couldn't afford to rent. I was up in Rochester, New York, working my first job, not making very much, just fresh out of college. And so at that time in 2008, I think the Obama administration was offering first-time homebuyers credits.
Yeah.
And so I was talking with my parents, and they're like, what about if you just bought a place and we'll help you a little bit with the down payment? that way you get to save some money. You don't have to pay as much. Like the mortgage payments are far less than renting. And then you also get this tax credit. So I'm like, okay, mom and dad, let's do that. And so ever since then, I've just been buying properties, and I, not even knowing, became a landlord because I would buy a property, then I would move on to the next job and move to another city or state. And I wouldn't sell it right away. I would just keep it, and I'll be like, oh, maybe I'll just rent it out either by the room or just rent the unit. And I didn't know anything about real estate strategies or being a landlord. I was just like, oh, I'll just rent it kind of thing. And usually to friends that I knew. And so I did that actually a few times. With every job that I had, every move that I made, I would buy a place and then I would live in it and then eventually rent it out before I sold it. And then through that, you're getting a little bit of cash flow from renting it. And then also pretty much every property I've sold a little bit higher than what I bought it for. So you get some natural appreciation going on, and it just kind of rolled. And I didn't know that people did this like full time, that this was a thing, but I was already doing it until like 2019, 2020 was when I started learning about real estate. And I was like, oh, I was kind of doing it. And then started learning more about the strategies and just continuing it further. And so I just kind of kept buying properties, even smaller ones, not like multifamily syndications, but just for ourselves. We have a small portfolio of rental properties. A lot of them were our primary homes that would be converted into rentals. And so, yeah, we just kind of kept doing that.
That the accidental landlord.
Yes.
I love that you were doing it for 10 years. Didn't know that other people really did that, right? Full
Mhm.
time. And that's kind of funny when you look back and where you are now,
Yeah.
after learning so much about real estate, and you saw, hey, there's appreciation there. Hey, there's some cash flow there, but it
Mhm.
never really clicked with you until you and your husband Googled it, then found wealthability, and you're like, oh my gosh, we've been
Mhm.
doing this, but we, kind of part-time or just kind of accidentally.
Right.
So in 2020, when you went to wealthability, started doing more intentional investing, I would
Mhm.
say.
Right.
What was it about that, that was just so attractive to you?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of things we were missing out before, when I was an accidental landlord, things like depreciation, and write-offs on taxes, even even on the passive income. Like I didn't know any of that. And I just reported it all as like, regular um filings and stuff. So I feel like there was just a lot of other incentives and benefits that not the common would know unless if you were really looking for it or working with a real estate CPA that's teaching you all of these things. Um, and so I feel like that was really insightful to us after becoming a more intentional investor and implementing some of the strategies around investing in real estate.
Yeah, I love that. So depreciation, just a paper loss. You don't actually lose money with depreciation,
Mm.
but that's a paper loss, so it reduces your taxes. Another way is the write-offs that you were able to do,
Mhm.
and that again also reduces your tax burden. And then the passive income side of things was probably amazing to you because you weren't used to that probably with your accidental investments, that being an
Mm.
accidental landlord, because you're probably doing some work on that, but the passive income side is really amazing. It was to me. And then
Yeah.
there's a lot of other incentives and benefits that you found out that you didn't know about for the 10 years prior, so that you were investing accidentally. I love that. What and I know you have a fund as well.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that fund and kind of break down what a fund is for the audience?
Yes, sure. So we actually have a few funds. Some of them are multifamily funds versus we have a short-term rentals fund that has a portfolio of just under 100 short-term rental
Wow.
properties across the US. And so funds are, I think to the limited partner, it's essentially the same as investing into a single asset investment, except you do have some diversification, which mitigates your risk. And I think that's a positive, in my opinion, because a lot of times you're investing in multiple properties as opposed to just one. So if you have one property that's performing, not so well, you have your others to kind of help boost up your returns. Um, and everything is just kind of the average of. So your returns are kind of the average of. And for the structure, a fund, basically we do fund of funds. So the key sponsor or whoever the main operator is has the target fund that is kind of the greater, the greater fund. And then there are different groups that come in as a fund, as a smaller fund, so fund of funds. And also it's called a special purpose vehicle. SPV is another name for it, where the smaller fund basically counts as one LP investment
Mhm.
that's broken up into individual investors, but that one LP investment comes into that master fund. And so because you're coming in at a larger amount, you're able to negotiate better economies of returns. You get a lot of times there's a larger spread in terms of your preferred return, your cash on cash, your IRRs, internal rate of returns. So basically you get a better, it's kind of like buying at bulk
Yeah.
at Costco, right? If you're buying, a case of 50 tissue boxes, your price per unit is less, but your value is better. And so if you're coming in as a fund at a greater amount, you kind of get a better value coming into that master fund. And so it's kind of a benefit, I think, for everyone, and also for the main operators. They don't have to take care of like 50 investors. They only have to take care of one investor as that larger fund. So it's kind of a win-win situation, I think, doing a fund of funds. It definitely has a lot of efficiencies and kind of just helps with diversification from an LP perspective as well.
I love your Costco analogy because that I think the audience can relate to that. So, and I'm just throwing a number out here, but let's say you have 100 investors in your fund,
Mhm,
because you have 100 investors in one fund. That one fund invest in the deal
mhm.
as a group, right? And
That's
so
right.
instead of those 100 investors going straight to that deal and getting whatever the returns are, because it's easier for that team to
Mhm.
deal with one fund as opposed to 100 investors, because you're working with 100 investors.
Yep.
So what that property, what the operator will do is say, okay, Christine, because it's one fund coming in at a much larger amount, we're going to give you better returns than if your
Mhm,
100 investors came in and invested directly with me.
mhm,
So I love that aspect. And then the other thing is, you're not investing in one deal, right? You're investing in, I think you said almost 100 short-term rentals right now,
mhm,
which gives you and your fund diversification. And the way I think about that is, if the audience has heard of like a portfolio loan,
mhm,
it's a loan on not one property or one asset, but multiple assets. And typically, the bank's terms are a little more generous because there's less risk because it's spread across, in this case, almost 100 properties.
mhm.
And if super large financial institutions are giving you a break, there's got to be some sense in doing that, because they're the ones that basically control the terms, the financial institutions. They're the ones that control interest rates and things like that. So if they're giving you a slight discount, there's got to be some wise reasons for that. So I love
Yeah.
that you guys are doing that. Helping, not, again, using my example, 100 investors are getting the
Mhm.
benefit because you're able to negotiate higher returns, but then they're not at risk because you guys are also invested in almost 100 properties. So I love
Mm.
that. Love that
Yeah,
aspect.
that's
Um,
right.
and how long are those funds open? Is it are they evergreen, or how does that work? Can
Yeah,
investors
so
always invest with you, I guess is what I'm asking.
yeah, we actually don't have an evergreen fund, but
Okay.
some investors do have that set up where it's like, an ongoing fund and they decide which assets to invest in.
Okay.
For us, it's closed because we want to give an expectation to our investors so that they know there is a beginning and end. If it's always ongoing, I feel like it can get a little bit confusing to kind of know when to come in and out. So for us, we like to have closed-ended funds. It's not to say in the future we won't have an evergreen fund. That could be likely, just based on, if we have more fund opportunities coming in. But for us, it's set up very similar to a single asset investment. The investors know exactly what properties are going to be in the fund. We like to set the expectations, because a lot of times, if it's just an open-ended fund, you're like, oh, what are they investing in? Like, we don't even know kind of thing. So we have the properties identified. If we don't exactly have the properties, we know the spec of what we're looking for that's identified already. And then we also typically like to do it within the year. So it's closed within the year that it's open.
Very cool. Okay. And we're going to do this at the end of the show as well, but I want to encourage guests to, or guests, want to encourage the audience to connect with you, Christine, on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And then we'll plug the website as well towards the end of the show. But I want to transition a little bit to your company and kind of what we talked a little bit about it in the intro about how you're looking in the Southeast. You guys work with passive investors and look for cash flowing and equity multiplying real estate opportunities. And then at the end of that sentence, I mentioned that your company creates lasting impacts to families, lasting impact on their future, and the communities that you invest in. So, want to really hit on that. What does your company stand for, and what's the goal or goals of your company?
Yeah. So my business partner, Margaret, and I, when we first formed, we were thinking of what to call our company. And I'm sure every
Oh
entrepreneur
yeah,
goes
oh
through this
yeah.
brainstorming session. So we were throwing out, random names and stuff. And so we're both believers, we're of Christian background
Mhm.
and faith, and we're both women. And so um there is, a verse in the Bible for women. It's kind of talking about who the noble woman is in Proverbs 23. So I know this isn't relevant to everyone because it's kind of religious, but in terms of values, this is kind of the values that we want to hold. Is we want to be, noble in what we do in investing, because a lot of times people look at investors and like, oh, they're sleazy. All they care about is profit and money, money, money. For us, we want to bring returns to our investors. That is our goal as a company, but it's more than just that. It's not just about money and profits. It's about, for our investors, it's creating a life that they can live their purpose and not have to worry about money. So really, we want to be able to have, different side incomes, another stream of cash flow, kind of increasing your retirement fund or your nest egg so that you don't have to worry as much about money. Because I feel like, when I was working, that was a big worry. Like, I didn't really want to work, right? I
Yeah.
wasn't feeling fulfilled in my job, but I was worried about my family's income at the end of the day. So we really wanted to have the opportunity and bring that opportunity to our investors to invest nobly and make impactful returns. That's actually our tagline. And in the impactful return side, we want to make sure that the housing we provide is affordable housing, right? We don't want to boost the rental income so much that it's not affordable. And as you mentioned before, inflation has exactly done that. And
Mhm.
so we want to keep housing affordable. We want to create safe, comfortable homes for the communities that we invest in. And not just that, the people that we hire in our communities, like property management, the leasing specialists, maintenance staff, we want to make sure that we're providing a great place of employment for them. So it kind of goes all 360 impact, not just bringing returns to our investor, but also to the communities that we do invest in. And really just kind of creating this nice, holistic environment where it is positive for everyone. That is mainly our goal. And, even the partners that we work with who are our boots on the ground, we want to make sure that our values are aligned to that. And we do a lot of vetting of our partners to make sure that we have that. And so that's kind of, the backstory of Noblivest and really the values that we stand for as a company.
I love that so much. I love a lot what you said. So your values, you want to be noble. It's not just about money. Obviously, that's a great benefit of this, but it's more about allowing passive investors to live their purpose, increase their nest egg, which would reduce stress in the long run. Because like you, when you were thinking about leaving your job or wanting to leave your job to focus on your family more, but you also didn't want to, you wanted to provide some income, right? And I think there's a lot of probably, especially women like you, Christine, that maybe you're feeling the same way, where they want to have kids, but they don't know, or maybe they do have kids and they don't want to work full time. They want to be at home. How can you bring in income? And I personally think through passive investing, that's something where, you spend some time up front to get to know who you're going to invest with and kind of educate yourself, understand what does short-term rental look like, or what does multifamily look like. But after you educate yourself, you just keep reinvesting and reinvesting. And, I don't know the exact returns that you look for, but if you could provide your family with additional streams of income over time, that just reduces so much stress. I think it really does allow you to live your purpose, whatever that is. Maybe you want to help in the community, maybe you want to do a nonprofit,
Right.
or create a small business, work on your passion project. And I think that just opens up so much more, so many more options. And then, you're going to be happier too, because like, hey, we're investing for our long term, right? And
That's
I'm
right.
not going and working 40 hours a week, driving back and forth. Kids are in daycare, things like that. So you're able. It just brings so many more options to the table.
Right.
And you brought up a lot of the non-monetary benefits of passive investing and what your company really stands for. So I love all of what you said. You look for impactful returns. You focus on affordable housing, safe homes, safe communities. And one thing that I think is sometimes lost in the mix is you want to provide great employment for your for the property management company that you work with, the leasing managers, the maintenance staff, and all of that. And then you also mentioned that the partners that you work with. So just for the audience, that would be the what we call in the business the operators that are running the properties, or working with the property management company to run those properties. We call them asset managers or operators. And you don't work with anyone, right? Just because the numbers look good, you won't just work with them. You have to vet them
Absolutely
first,
not.
right?
Yes, absolutely not. We don't just jump in the ship, be like, all right, let's do this kind of thing. We do extensive vetting. We have to know these individuals personally. And a lot of times, the first meeting place is at a conference. And I think a face-to-face meeting is really important. And really keeping the communication lines open. So we tend to get to know our sponsors and operators at least 6 to 12 months before we work with them on a deal. And a lot of times in that time frame, we are personally investing our own money as an LP first. So we're testing the waters ourselves so that we can get a better understanding of how they run their operations truly. Because a lot of times, people can say something, but it could end up being a different story. And so we do that first. We usually invest our own capital before we bring in investor capital, along with background checks and an extensive interview. So all of those things are what we do. We take very seriously where we place our investor capital, and yeah, we just want to make sure the values align. That's the most important thing. It's not all just profitability and cash, cash money or cash flow. It's like it's all of those things, in addition to the returns.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, anyone can put numbers on a spreadsheet and say, "Oh, these
Mhm.
are the returns we're going to get." I've seen it firsthand. You've probably seen it, and know people that have foreclosed on some properties that underwriting looked phenomenal, and uh,
Yeah.
hundreds of people invested, and it went to foreclosure.
Hmm.
And I think people sometimes get um, they see the numbers, the returns, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm all in," without really
Hmm.
doing their due diligence. So, kind of
Exactly.
want to turn the tables and ask you, if I wanted to invest, or the audience member, the audience wanted to uh, uh, invest in a fund, in
Hmm.
your fund, right?
Hmm.
What would you want them to ask you so they feel comfortable, or that I feel comfortable uh, investing my very, very hard-earned money in your
Hmm.
fund?
Yes, absolutely. So we typically have at least a couple conversations. If you're someone that I just met, recently, usually a lot of our investors are people that we know personally and have come from our past lives. And so they already know us. They know kind of the values that we work with and in kind of like our personality. But if you're just someone I just met, new, we would have a couple conversations. It goes both ways. So you would ask me questions, obviously, about like, what's this investment about? Like, what's the process kind of thing? And I encourage all investors. So I can actually provide this to your listeners. We have a kind of a spreadsheet of the top questions to ask an operator or a sponsor of a deal. So it's vetting three things within the deal. It's number one, the deal itself. So there's some series of questions to ask. The market, because the market is extremely important. A lot of times you have to make sure the market supports the growth of the deal,
Yeah.
right? And third is whoever the driver is your operator, right? So these are the three elements that you have to really do your due diligence on. And yeah, I'm happy to provide that to your listeners. And not just that, number four, and I've said this a lot, is values. So ask why. Why are you doing this? And that's what I ask my investors. Why do you want to do this? Right. So what's your goal? What's your intention? A lot of my investors want to diversify their portfolio. A lot of them hear my story and really relate to that too. And they want to retire early, right? And
Mhm.
spend more time with their family. I think that is probably the one most important thing is you want to make sure where you place your money sits in alignment with where your values are and where your goals are moving towards. And so that's what we want to provide for our investors because we have our own goals. We have our message and our values that Noblivest stands for. We want to make sure not just our partners, but also our investors are aligned to those goals. So then it becomes a natural and very successful relationship, three ways between us, the investors, and the operator partners. So I would highly encourage that. And also like a lot of times, we like to keep our investors within our network. I actually encourage our LPs to network with other capital raisers, other companies and operators too, because you don't want to just put all your eggs in one basket. It's good to diversify also who you invest with, but also keeping in mind that it's important to find people that you have aligned values with. And so I think in our business and community of our industry, we we all work with one another at the end of the day. Like we all know each other, and so it's a friendly camaraderie, I feel like. So I encourage, my investors to get to know other operators as well.
Awesome. Yeah. And I love what you said. So, just to recap that, you have a spreadsheet that has questions that the audience members can reach out to you and get that spreadsheet. It has a bunch of questions on there that go over three things that I've heard quite often. And then the fourth, I don't think I've ever heard that But for someone that wants to invest, they need to understand the deal, the market, and the team, right? The driver, the operator, the general partnership team.
Yep.
But then the fourth one that you mentioned, which I really, really love, is values. Why are you doing this? And they ask you your values, but you also ask them their values, because I think what's important about that, Christine, and you probably know this too, but there's so many different investment strategies. If if someone in the audience is about to retire, maybe you have a couple funds, maybe that fund is not best for them, right? But
Right.
maybe there's a different fund that would actually work out better. And so that, and I see that with even though I don't have a fund, I see that with investors where they're like, I don't want to get in this to this deal, because that's a big, I don't want to say a risk, but they're at the retirement age and they have money. And so they're looking to preserve it and get cash flow, as opposed to, not much cash flow for the first few years and then a nice return in 4 or 5 years.
Right.
I don't want them to invest in that. I want them to feel safe, right? I want them to be comfortable. And I love that you point that out, because I've never really thought about it from, there's 4 things. There's not 3 things that passive investors need to question and think about. It's 4 things. And the values is probably the biggest one, in my opinion, and then the GP team, the team that's going to be running it. So those are huge. So I love that you point out the values, because I don't think I've ever heard that before. So what, over the next, let's say 12 months or so, what are some company goals that you have?
For us at Noblivest, we are looking to diversify our portfolio. I would say our bread and butter in the last couple years have been multifamily, and I think that's a space that a lot of people play in. And we still believe multifamily is very strong and can weather, this kind of wonky economic environment that we're in right now. Certainly, it's not quite as lucrative as it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I would say, but the returns are still very strong. And I think multifamily is still strong. We will continue to play in that space, but we are also looking to diversification. So, as mentioned, we have a short-term rentals portfolio, and we know that short-term rentals is a high revenue generating strategy. And so when you put, say, like 80 to 100 properties together, it's a high cash flowing opportunity there. And so the returns, I think, are kind of similar, but kind of more cash flow at the front end, at least, after stabilizations starting from like year 2 and beyond. And so we have that as our current asset class in our portfolio. We're looking into businesses, things like, car washes, maybe even laundromats. That's kind of out there, but it's just, we're looking for high revenue generating type of businesses that are very strong and resilient to any economic changes in our country. And so, I would say in the next year or so, we will be diversifying. And still hold on to multifamily, but also going beyond that a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. The short-term rental space is interesting to me, because I think when it first started, it was this awesome, holy cow, I don't have to stay at a hotel. I get to stay in a nice home and kind of relax and have more space, a full kitchen and things like that. What I've seen is most of the short-term rental operators are people. Maybe it's a couple, but it's people, right? It's not teams. And I think what's interesting is now, after, I don't know how old Airbnb is, let's say 12, 15 years, somewhere in there. Now I am seeing property management companies start getting into that short-term and mid-term rental. You had places like, on the coast and high vacation towns that did offer that, right? They've been doing that for way before Airbnb and VRBO were around. But now property management companies who typically only did single family or multifamily, the 12-month rental or longer, now they are getting into the short-term and midterm rental. It is the short-term rental, in my opinion, as an operator, is a lot more work because you're dealing with people potentially weekly come in or a couple times a week. But if you have a good operator, a good team, good process, good property management company, those can be cash cows, just plain and simple.
Right.
So I love that you mentioned that. Car washes, laundromats, those are two asset classes that I really like as well, for a couple of reasons. You mentioned income generating, but then there's also real estate attached to that, right? And when you have real estate, it reduces the risks.
That's right.
Both from the lending standpoint, the insurance standpoint, and even diversifies your risks as the owner or operator of those. So I love those asset classes. Christine, we have a few minutes left, and I want to ask you a few questions that I ask everyone, but what's a recent book that you've read or listened to that really stands out to you?
Yes. So I am reading currently a book called Pitch Anything by Oren Clough, and it's a really great book. Just, as capital raisers, and people in this industry, and really just in life, I feel like we're always negotiating and trying to pitch something. Even like my 6-year-old, I'm always trying to pitch, eating dinner to him.
Yeah.
And he just doesn't have it, or even going to bed. So I think I really like that book because it's a lot of it is about really psychology, and reading people and just trying to get on the same wavelength to be aligned with them so that you can communicate, something with them. In an idea. So I really like that book. I'm only about halfway through, so I can't say I know 100% like what it gets to, but so far it's really great. I highly recommend it to anyone. And
Awesome.
another book, kind of one of my favorites, is The One Thing. And so we're all busy people, whether or not, you invest in real estate or not. I feel like time is the most rare resource that we have in life. And so just being able to prioritize your time and really do, like for me, that was really important to time block because I'm working on so many different work streams while also being mom. It's just so critical to kind of be able to really organize everything. So I love The One Thing. It's kind of my go-to book.
Awesome. Very cool. You were talking about you're pitching dinner to your 6-year-old.
Yeah.
He's pitching candy and staying up late and different types of dinner, different food to you. So it works both ways. And
yes,
I have a 10-year-old, and man, she always is, pushing back on us, and she's good. A lot of times we're like, okay, yeah, works for us,
Yeah.
But yeah, I've heard that book, Pitch Anything. That and probably dozens of other books are on my reading list. The One Thing, I believe, is Gary Keller.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. And I've heard that's just phenomenal. That's not on my reading list, but it needs to be. And then I know we talked about, Christine, kind of what are the company goals over the next 12 months, but would you say the goals are very similar over the next 5 years, or what do you think, where do you think you'll be in 5 years?
Yeah, it's hard to say what we're going to be in 5 years. I feel like that's kind of far away. And also our market is changing so drastically now. So I feel like it's just really important to pivot accordingly. There's a lot of unknowns in terms of what the next 12, maybe 6 to 12 months will look like. But also in the times of transition, it's also the best opportunity for great ideas to come in fruition. And so for me, as just staying nimble over the next few years to see what happens and really adapting to the environment, I think that's very important. We don't know where the wave is going to take us, but just always be ready for what comes.
Love that. Yeah. You said, excuse me, market is changing. So there's going to be a lot of pivots and unknowns, transitions you're going to have to make. And I think the best thing that anyone can do, regardless of real estate or whatever, is stay nimble, stay flexible. I love that. Okay, so what's the best way for audience that want to learn more about your funds or just talk to you? Maybe it's the spreadsheet, but they want to get to know you better. What's the best way to reach you, Christine?
So the best way to reach me is probably on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so I think you'll include the link in the show notes below. And also right on my page, there is a Calendly link. If you want to schedule time to speak with me, feel free to book time with me directly there. That's probably the best way to get direct access to me. But yeah, I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you on LinkedIn. Also, if you're interested in what we do at Noblivest, you can apply to join our investor club. So right on our website at noblivest.com, it's spelled Noblivest.com. There is a top link button that says invest with us. You can put in some of your, general information on there. There's no commitment at all to invest with us, but if you want to follow us and kind of get access to our educational content and some of our deals, we do require that we speak with you first before you get access to all of our deals. But at least you have, access to what our company is working on in general if you join the investor club. So yeah, that's another way to kind of follow us at Noblivest.
Awesome. Love that. We will put your LinkedIn, your calendar link, your website, and then if there's any other social media handles, we'll put that in the show notes. Christine, this has been amazing. I mean, I love your story of doing really well in the corporate world, even though you weren't fulfilled by it. Became a mom, everything changed, your focus changed. And now what I love is you are fulfilled. You are able to follow your passion that you didn't even know would be a passion, a few years ago. And you just made some phenomenal gains, both, probably professionally, but also for the future of your family. Right. And I think that's what it's all about. I love your values, what you stand for, what the company stands for. I highly encourage the audience, if they're even on the fence, just reach out to Christine. Check out the website. She's not going to hurt you. She won't bite you, but she'll probably give you a ton of good information. Christine, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you so much, Charlie. The pleasure is all mine.
Thank you for listening to today's show, brought to you by H&K Investment Group, your home for passive investing. If you want to learn more about how you can invest with us, please check out our website at hkigllc.com. Don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to our podcast. Please leave us a review to let us know how we are doing. Feel free to connect with me directly on LinkedIn or Facebook. As always, I'm your host, Charlie Hardage. Catch you next time.